All right, good afternoon. The time is 3 p.m. It is Wednesday, May 15th, 2024. This is a special meeting workshop by the Argyle ISD Board of Trustees. At this time, we will determine if a quorum is present.
Leona McDade, present.
Richie Deffenbaugh, present.
Leanne Artho, present.
Matt Slayton, present. Greg Oxworth, present.
I, Sam Slayton, present. We do have a quorum established. This time we'll have a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
All right, we'll have a brief moment of silence. All right, thank you. Okay.
Yes, and then we'll move down there and do that. So we'll do public forum first.
All right. We're going to do public forum. This will be my first reading of the evening, of the day of this, not the last. So here we go. I'm hopeful over the summer, Rick, maybe we can record a portion of this.
That's right.
Maybe. That'd be awesome. All right, public forum. We'll now move into public forum portion of this afternoon's meeting. Please note, board policy requires speakers to sign up in person before the meeting is called to order. During this portion of the meeting, board members will listen to comments, but as the designated spokesperson, only the president may respond to the speaker if needed and refer concerns to the appropriate administrator. Speakers can comment on agenda items, but trustees will not be able to discuss the items until they are before the board during the meeting. During special meetings, such as today, speakers can only comment on agenda items. Board policy BED local provides the presiding officer the ability to adjust the time allotted per speaker for effective meeting management. Pursuant to that policy, an individual's comments to the board at this afternoon's meeting shall not exceed 5 minutes. The presiding officer may reduce the allotted time for individual to speak to no less than 1 minute for effective meeting management. Speakers are not allowed to receive time from other individuals. This afternoon, each speaker will receive 5 minutes. Specific complaints about individual district personnel are to be processed through the district's grievance policy as set out in district policies DBA, FNG, and/or GF. Speakers are not permitted to refer to individual students or employees by name during the public comment period. Additionally, if you have a pending grievance that may come before the board in a level 3 hearing, please refrain from addressing the topic of your grievance except through the grievance process. Per board policy BED and this board's operating procedures, the board will not allow disruption of the board meeting by members of the public if, after one warning from the presiding officer, any person continues to disrupt the meeting by words or actions, the person will be removed from the meeting. All right, here we go. We have 3 people signed up. First is Acela Spiegelberg. I'll wet my whistle now.
It's a lot. It's a long spill.
That's right. All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Time is yours.
Thank you. So, since you are discussing the bond today, I wanted to come forward and discuss not my specific reasons for voting no, but my specific reasons for advocating others to vote no. So I personally, with friends and family, we went around and we spoke to, we spoke to a lot of people in many different communities about the concern that was brought up during the first bond informational meeting, specifically the fact that there were no financial projections done on what the effect of this bond would be on our maintenance and operating budget. Essentially, yes, we have the bonding capacity for this right now, but what is building all of this going to cost on our operating side? Especially right now when people are starting to see that there are changes happening because of the budget issues that we're having that are not necessarily your fault right now, but as a parent that's still going to have children in this district for 11 more years, it is important for me to know that the quality of education that my child receives in 11 years is similar or better than the one that my children are currently having right now. And if we do not have if we cannot balance a budget because of extra infrastructure or things that we do not need, that's going to be an issue. And that's something that, as a voter, I should know. And I believe that other people should be aware of that as well. So I feel like this is a really good opportunity for you guys to get together. Make sure that this bond, if this is truly what you want moving forward, that we can make sure that it's not going to negatively affect our ability to provide a proper education for our students, whether it be 10 years from now or 20 years from now. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Aaron Reed.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Time is yours.
This is always kind of awkward. I wish this could be a two-way conversation. You'd think as many teenagers as I have in my house, I'm used to talking to myself. But so I've had a few days to reflect on the recent election. And initially, probably like you, I was disappointed in the failure of Propositions A and B to pass. However, I genuinely believe that this was a blessing. It allows our district time to reflect and plan and execute a decisive, swift plan for our kids. I believe the failure of the bonds can be directly attributed to the population of people who, knowingly or unknowingly, believe what they read on social media to be factual. While many of these same people had no problem voting for a second football stadium and a second indoor facility, they voted down the softball and baseball fields, not because they think the students don't need it, but because they think it will prevent the execution of the strategic plan for the district to split into 2 or 3 high schools. I believe it could be argued that the failure of this bond was possibly retaliation for not getting their way, and this mindset is not the Argyle way. The last 3 elections have proved that the majority of this town does not want one mega high school. All candidates who have been voted onto the board ran on clear, undeniable platforms supporting the strategic plan for a split into 2 and eventually 3 high schools. We desire that our schools remain small in order to give our students the best experience possible. This district was built on families who are involved, active, and invested in the schools, and that cannot happen in a school of 4,000 students. Those same people who've supported the district for decades will continue to support it and back you up. Our elected officials and whatever decisions that you decide to make. And after the last 2 recommendations from the committees, the high school committee and the bond committee were dismissed, I'm asking that we please stop wasting the time and resources on committees and trust our elected officials to do what you were elected to do. We've put our trust in you for a good reason. So please stay steadfast on the course for the split. Ignore this loud minority that claims that most of the district wants one large high school or even wants to wait 1 minute longer to split. The majority of the district, while not as loud or outspoken, strongly prefers 2 high schools that do not compete against each other in the same division. So let's put an end to those ridiculous claims of racism, illegal activity, or an unethical behavior from this minority who didn't get their way. Let's stop the division and accusations and consider splitting the district as soon as possible. My current 23-year-old daughter attended Argyle when the 377 campus was 7th through 12th. And initially, of course, I had some concerns sending my 13-year-old baby girl to school with 18-year-old men. However, in typical AISD fashion, they planned it very well. And the middle schoolers never even saw the high schoolers. It was a wonderful arrangement. And I strongly suggest we consider this arrangement again. Now that we have no bond for a middle school or the expansion of the high school, we're going to run out of room quickly, as you know. And those of us who are involved in the schools and love the traditions of AISD will support you, the board and the admin, and continue to trust our elected officials to make the decisions that are in the best interest of our district. So please consider splitting as soon as possible, stick to the plan, put an end to the negativity in our sweet district, and allow us to move on to do what is best for our kids. We are not the minority. Know you have our support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our last public speaker today, Jane Krzyzak. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. First, I want to thank everybody for their hard work that worked on the bond. I was on that committee, which for the first time was on a bond committee, a little reluctantly, but I did it, and was glad I did. I was also disappointed and surprised about it not passing, but I also think it's a gift, quite honestly, that it didn't, because frankly, there were some things in it that I didn't love. I think it was a compromise, which is usually how things happen in a big committee, and that's okay as well. But I do think it's a blessing, like Mrs. Reed said. I think it's a great opportunity to rethink things. One of the things that concerned me when I was in it was that there was not a longer term vision. And that's really on our admin from way back. I'm talking 10 years ago. I've been here since 2011. I wish that we had been, and I'm not hating on anybody. They had their things, I'm sure many things to deal with that I wasn't aware of. But the fact that we've never had any land banked is crazy. And as far as looking at, when I was working on the bond committee, I took it very seriously, as I'm sure the others did as well. I looked up lots of information with other communities that have had bonds. I looked at their planning, how many square miles, how many schools they had, where they were. And one of the things that's always struck me is that why haven't we been looking at the whole district and trying to strategically decide where our buildings and campuses should be? There was a gentleman on the bond committee that lives in Harvest that was like, when am I getting a school? Well, he wasn't talking about elementary school, he was talking about high school. And this is really, at a minimum, in my view, some of you have heard me say this, I've said it, we talked about it in my committee, actually, my table. This is a 3 high school town, at least. And I am all for that Canyon Falls and 377 are not expanded. And quite honestly, I think that's part of why the bond failed. I think there was a contingent of people who had some concerns and kind of got going in one direction, but there were a lot of people that were quietly like, why are we expanding 377? It's a much smaller acreage site. It's going to cost a lot of money to redo all that. Why aren't we taking all that money and putting up a 3rd high school up in the north where people don't have to drive from their communities all the way down to Canyon Falls or to 377. And if you have a teen driver, or you don't yet, you won't like that. You won't like your teenager being on 35 and in 25 minutes worth of traffic, and then a train, depending on which way you're coming and all the things. You will not like it. And so all that to say that the smart move to me has always been sort of mind-boggling, that people, instead of seeming to be concerned maybe when they're about to retire, or maybe when their children, their specific children, are about to graduate, they seem really interested in that versus looking at the bigger picture 10 and 20 years out. It's, to me, has been a shortcoming and a disappointment. And that's really human nature, right? I mean, I don't mean to be raggy, I'm sorry if I am, but that's just one thing that's sort of been mind-boggling to me. As far as being able to do hard things, we can do hard things. My child also, my oldest, was in a 7 through 12 campus at 377. We've been in portables. We can do it. And I think when I came into the district, the economy was not very good. They had to cut Spanish at Hilltop, which they had at the time, and everybody was in an uproar. But I had just gotten here. I was like, what's the big deal? So we can do hard things. We may have to do hard things because of budgeting. That doesn't make us a bad district. Every district is facing that. We can give our kids good things if we pull together and work together. What we really need is connection and engagement and opportunity for our kids. And my oldest that is at home right now, not my oldest, but my oldest that's at home right now in high school, came home with this very large yearbook last night. And I thought it was interesting. I'm going to read you just a few comments from people. There was a theme in some of it. I'm not going to list names, obviously, but students saying, Argyle is growing so much, it's difficult to know everyone in my grade. In middle school, I knew everyone. This was a 12th grade girl. Everyone is bred for competitiveness, unlike any other school. And by the way, I like to win, I like sports, I like excelling, but I thought there was a little bit of an uncomfortable theme in a lot of these to me. That's not what it's about. Our kids need to feel connected, they need to feel known, they need to have teachers have their back, teachers need to be known, and that's what we really need to do differently. The competition in Argyle is like any other, only the best can make it. That's another thing. I mean, I don't know. One of the words too, capacity. I only have 19 seconds left. We've got to rethink the capacity. I know we changed our capacity numbers, and I'll tell you right now, overcrowded, large, those are words people use to describe it. If you've been there, you know that those hallways are not particularly safe. They're kind of a fire hazard, to be honest. And so I'm all for, let's make all the schools small and give everybody the best that we can. So.
Thank
I have
you.
more to say. I'll have to come back. I'll have to cut it short.
Okay.
All right.
So we will move
We're gonna-
down.
Public forum has been concluded, so we will move down for the workshop portion of the meeting.
Greg, we're still rolling, good? Okay, very good. Okay, we will move forward in the workshop portion. So administration has worked together over the last, I guess, about 10 days now at this point, to pull together an opportunity for the board to come together shortly after the bond election cycle so that we can debrief as a group and talk about our next steps. This workshop is built on administration taking our strategic growth plan and looking at what our realities are and our next steps for moving forward. So this gives you an opportunity as a board to work through and talk through and ask questions based on what we have put together as an administration. So really what we're going to talk about a little bit today and give you a chance to debrief on is we're going to talk about the goals of the original bond and why it was built the way it was. We're going to talk about voter data, just so you have a chance to see. Obviously, at our 5 o'clock special meeting in a little bit, you will canvass those votes, but we do have our official voter data in from Denton County we want to share with you. Just some of the feedback we've received. I know some of you have received some feedback. And then reviewing our strategic plan without passage of the bond proposition. So we're talking our capacities, timelines, and everything moving forward now that we know what our realities are, and then our potential short-term bond schedules moving forward. Knowing what the committee brought together in a whole bond package long-term, we've broken that into some smaller packages to bring to you to review. So just to kind of recap, the goals of the bond, it was originally coming out of committee is to develop that educational space, making sure our students had the best experience educationally, but also to avoid the overcrowding aspect. And we know that in the past, we have built schools and we open them, and they're almost at capacity already. So we were originally trying to get us in a position where we could be proactive and have those bonding funds available for us to build those facilities in time. It also, out of the committee, was to avoid bond fatigue. We have had several short-term bonds in the past. We had one in 22, and here we are 2 years later. We had the previous one in 2017. Prior to that was 2014. So it was just several bonds in a row, and so the committee wanted to look at that as more of a long-term bond program. And then also give us money to buy some large parcels of land. I know it was just mentioned a while ago in public comment, you know, we have not land banked as a district, and so this would have given us the opportunity to do some of those things, and as fast as developers are buying land, we need to purchase land as well, and so that would have given us that. So that was another goal of that bond, and then to build those facilities for the growth of our students. We know what our growth is, we know what our demographers' projections are, we know what's coming, and so that would have given us the opportunity to provide those classroom spaces. So really the feedback we've received as a district, I know some of y'all have received some over the course of the last week and a half, really. Prop A was just too expensive, really, for this community to be able to take that in. There was not an appetite for that necessarily with the escalation and inflation built in. And so we've heard that from several community members. Differing opinions on high school configuration, although that was never part of the bond program. We talked about that in our bond presentations publicly. That was not, it wasn't if this doesn't pass, we don't move forward with transitioning to a second high school. That is part of what we are doing. So we had some of that going on. We had some 377, that campus acreage, I think it was mentioned in public comment as well. Just not big enough to expand what we had on the bond proposal going to 1,750 students. Most of the dollars were for long-term projects, not immediately needed, kind of seeing what the economy's going to do. Did we need to have that much inflation built in? And then we dealt with, as a district, throughout the entire process, especially during early voting, just misrepresented information. We were answering FAQs. We answered, I know, over 50 just in that 2-week period. We even had some face-to-face meetings with some community members, but that information was put out on social media channels and it wasn't accurate. And so as much as we tried to refer community back to our FAQs, we had some information out there that was inaccurate that really, according to the feedback we're receiving, caused some people to vote no, and it was misconstrued information based on a face-to-face meeting held in this building. So we're dealing with lots of different layers to all of this as we come out and reflect on the bond propositions that did not pass. So our voter data, before we get into how we are planning to move forward as a district, we have 5,507 students right now enrolled in the district. Our total registered voters on the official results is 15,877. We had 3,007 ballots cast. Now, not all of those are actual numbers you'll see in a minute, because those are actual ballots. Some of them were overvoted, some undervoted. And so that was a voter turnout of 18.94% in the district. By precincts, which you'll see in just a moment, it ranged from 15 to 22%. So here's your precincts. Here's all 11 of our precincts. You'll see the voter turnout based on precinct. You see there where I talked about the ranges. We had one precinct that's very, very few people, very, very low density. I think 3 people in that precinct, and there was no voter turnout in that one. But you'll see there all 11 precincts that make up our district that had the opportunity to vote. Just some historical bond information. We went through and pulled the previous bonds. I mentioned earlier that we've done these short-term bonds over time. And you can see prior to 22, which I think the law changed in 2019, you only had one proposition. You didn't have to break things out. And so you'll see there total votes cast, percent for, percent against, and kind of the difference there. 2022, we had over 4,000 turnout at the election during that year, that spring. Overwhelming, it was a 70-30 on Prop A, so that one was a big one. And then this one, you'll see we had 2968, 2987, and 2986. Just as a frame of reference, I think it's interesting, and you'll see this when you canvass in a little bit. We had over 2,900 on the propositions that cast votes, but we only had 2,600 people in the board seat elections. So we had over 300 people casting votes on the bond that never even voted for the school board seat. And you'll see that when you do canvassing. You'll hear about that later.
Can I ask a question?
You bet.
And
Yes, please, anytime.
know this? I don't know if she can jump in.
She can if we call her at the table.
Typically, like I remember the 2022 bond, and it had elementary, middle school, all that kind of things. And the idea of trying to figure out the M&O budget for opening another school never came into the conversation. Like, no one was like, but it costs more to have another middle school, or it costs more to run another elementary school. Typically, whenever you're doing a bond for high schools, do you add that into the cost? Like, does that ever come into play?
I'm gonna call her at
Is
the
that-
table. She works with a lot of communities, so I'll let her kind of talk her experience. I know what my answer to that would be, but I'll let her explain.
Well, considering the fact that you have a very knowledgeable CFO,
Yes.
yes, your budget planning would put together what those projections would be in
Right.
order for you to meet a budget.
Right.
Now, in this day and age, it's a little hard for us to know what the balanced budget is because of our funding situation.
Right.
But yes, and I think Liz probably said.
But as you're doing bond planning with communities, M&O is never part of that conversation.
Oh, no.
Yes,
That's what
no,
she's asking.
That's what I'm asking, because they
Absolutely.
never asked for it to open another elementary school or another middle school. It was just like, well, yeah, we need another school. But for some reason, whenever it came to the high school, that was used in a lot of the
Yeah.
negative,
I see what you're saying.
negativity towards the bond, and it has nothing to do with it.
Right. Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying now, yes. We do not discuss those things in the committee. The committee's purpose is to plan for facilities.
Right.
And they focus on the INS side of the money.
Right.
And that's what we explained to them, and that's what they know, and then that's also where our tax implications come, but which you didn't have any
Right.
tax rate
And
implications.
do voters usually have access, like do people usually do projections for like, this is what it's gonna take to operate 2 high schools and
No.
that's necessary to
No.
vote?
Mm-mm. No, ma'am.
Well, Liz, let me ask this, and I don't know if I'll be able to verbalize it eloquently enough. But if hypothetically one was to go out to bond for, let's say, another high school, and the growth did not warrant another high school, in your position, this hypothetical situation, as a CFO, would you advise a committee or advise administration or a board and say, from a financial perspective, like, this is not going to work out opening a school that's going to have way too few kids in it and having to hire for that? I know it's a hypothetical because we've always bonded for what we need to meet the future growth or meet the growth that's already here.
No, that's a good question. And I think that came up a few times, and it has in the past too. Basically, we're asking voters to authorize a bond plan, right, what we have on the propositions, but the timing of those needs may speed up, they may delay, and you aren't going to sell the bonds for a project if there's no need at that time. You have to have the bonding capacity, and you need the need for the project. So if growth is slowed down, you're going to wait until that growth is either there or is projected to come back into the picture in order to build that building.
So like Crowley last year, they opened their brand new football stadium. They bonded for that 11 years prior. Okay. So they didn't need the stadium, but they had foresight that a decade from now, we're gonna be big enough that we're gonna need a new football stadium, so. Okay.
That's correct. There's many schools that do long-range
Right.
bond planning and bonds where they're asking their voters to authorize that for, a 10-year plan, a future plan. And then they issue issue bonds as the projects are needed. And it may not be all right at once. It may be that you need a little bit in 2 years, you need a little bit in 4 years. It depends on the growth and the speed of that growth.
And if it's never needed, you don't sell the bonds.
That's correct.
And another, sorry.
I was gonna say, it can also be fiscally responsible to, if you know you're needed, and you know you're going to need it, and you're confident in that, you can build it in today's dollars.
Correct.
Right? So you are being fiscally responsible, you're saving a certain amount of money to do that. You mentioned that in a lot of cases, maybe most cases, you don't bond for it until you need it. The risk in that, if you really know you're gonna need it, if your demographer has been as on point as ours has, and you wait 2 or 3 extra years to build it, in the most recent years, that's looking at 15 to 20% increase in cost. So,
It costs more historically. I don't want anybody to come back and tell me, 1 year in history that was wrong. I mean, I understand, but the majority of time, it costs more to build in the future than it does today.
sure.
And we played at a stadium at the beginning of this season that was brand new and opening. That was part of a bond 9-10 years ago, an original high school plan, and was never even had to be on its own proposition because it was part of that plan however many years ago, similar to what you're talking about with Crowley. So,
So just as a matter of comparison, now that you mentioned that, West, South, and Jane Russman are all the same floor plan, roughly.
Similar.
I know there's been a couple of adaptations. Can you just off the top of your head remember what the cost for each of those round numbers were? You're building the same school, basically the same materials, 2019, 2022, and 2024.
It was somewhere in the neighborhood of $230 a square foot for West. We are up to over 400 on JRE, and I believe we'll have to look up South. South was somewhere in between,
Yeah, okay.
It was over 300.
I believe, but I'd have to go
so
back.
I can tell you, Argyle West was $225 a square foot.
Okay.
South was $258 a square foot. Russman was $419 a square foot.
And I have thousands of examples I can give you.
I can give you a different architect with another district that I have right here. They had one in 2021 that was 308. The very next year, in 2022, was 381. 2023 was 414. And they are bidding one at this point, which would have been November, at 425.
And that's for all elementaries?
That's all elementary. It's the same, yes.
Because we're seeing high schools over $500 a square foot right now.
Yes.
Correct.
Because I know there were some concerns about, oh my gosh, it's $511 million. Well, there's a reason it's $511 million, because if you start looking at the prices to build the same thing that you might have wanted to build 5 years ago, it's a totally different set of numbers.
And we've been caught up in those same examples from the 22 bond, trying to get 4 open,
Yes,
so.
High school's about 360 million right now.
between land and building, not even land,
Just the building.
just the building.
Marty,
How much
why
are you charging?
don't- Marty, why don't you come up here,
Well-
so you're, because we need you as
Can you restate what you said?
can you restate that, please?
Absolutely. A new high school that we're doing for one of your neighbors right now is pushing 360 million. So, and that's just construction costs. So that's not land, that's not FF&E. That is, I believe it's a 2,400 capacity.
2,400.
Don't quote me on that,
Right,
but it's
but around.
somewhere in that neighborhood, yeah. So we're seeing anywhere between, 320, 360. So,
So if we were to, our middle school, we kind of know it's a capacity of 1,200, it's got at least 1 or 2 gyms, some outdoor space. And if you were to build a high school to Ms. Krzyak's point, to a smaller high school to 1,200, let's say, what would the additional cost be to make it a high school versus a middle school? I know there's a theater, there's
Competition gym.
Yeah, I'm just wondering.
there's a whole lot of infrastructure that goes along with that, and it can vary widely depending on the
Is that
the
50%
CTE
of
programs.
the cost, 30% of the cost, and any ballpark idea?
Well, just look, what's the GMP in the middle school?
What's the GMP on our middle school? Do you
I can
have
look it
that,
up.
Justin?
Right,
Jeff
take
just-
that and take the difference between the 360 million
Yeah.
and whatever that
But no,
is.
you just built to a 2,400 high school there, I'm just trying to see.
For
if-
So what do you want to build it to?
Well, I'm saying if we build a smaller high school,
It was a comparable size.
1,200 or so, what that
A
would,
1,200 high school is what you're asking? To make it, taking the middle school that's set at 1,200 and making it high school at 1,200?
I'm just trying to
You're
figure
just trying,
out.
you're trying
He's
to
trying to figure
for the
out.
middle school that we're building.
I'm clarifying.
Because the concept is, if we need a third high school,
So
we wouldn't
you're-
need to build it to 2,400, I'm just kind of curious.
Are you trying to replicate 377 in a sense, 1,300, 1,200 kids? If you built a small high school.
So Liz has the GMP.
For the middle school, which is being built for around 1,200 capacity, its construction only is a little over 87 million.
So, can you build, hypothetically speaking, not holding you to anything, can you build a smaller high school with a smaller footprint, knowing that we're landlocked, and 110 acres is not an option,
Readily available.
that has sewer, water, electric, willingness.
Sure.
So can you build a smaller footprint high school, 65 acres? What's a minimum acreage, knowing that you have to have, if it's a high school, you have to have a lot of other components?
I've built a high school on 45 acres. It was really tough,
Wow.
but we did it, and it was, at that time, it was 2,100 students. Now, it took a shoehorn, and it was not an easy ordeal. You start to look at parking garages and things like that when you get into that territory, which are
You have to
incredibly
build up.
expensive.
Yeah.
And you're looking at 3 stories.
And it's vertical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that's how you start to do it. And if you look at schools on the East Coast, they're faced with a lot of land restrictions, and have to do things like that.
I mean, for me, again, I go back to the comments that I heard, which are $511 million. Oh my gosh, that's a huge number, but you start looking at the costs for these schools and you use inflation and, you may not need it for 2 years, you might not need it for 4 years, you had a long-term bond. You have to add in that inflation for every year that you wait to build the school.
Absolutely.
And I know when we're building Russman, we came in, $8 million under budget was our bonding?
Over.
Over.
Oh, but that's what I mean, over, yeah. And we had to find $8 million to complete that campus, and only because I know that we are great bond people and we have a wonderful CFO and great leadership that we were able to find that money and kind of move things around and get that school on the ground. But that's, I mean, the public just needs to know that's what we're facing.
Well,
You know, so $511 million isn't,
But finding the money, it's
but
value
we're kind of
engineering.
re-arguing the logic that we developed to present this bond. Well, it wasn't as well received. That $500 million price tag means something. Viscerally, it means something to people.
right.
And we did know that we had to have high inflationary categories. So take those learnings and then say, okay, what can we do to be more fiscally responsible, to make do with what we have right now and still present the best educational opportunity for our students, and then determine what is palatable for bonding. I think we're going to see it's probably more of a short-term philosophy because people don't have to argue the assumptions, right? It's kind of just laid out for you.
Right. It's more immediate and they can kind of see it and feel it in that sense, yeah.
Well, I do think what you said about educational opportunities is important, because when I think of the school buildings my kids go to, I don't necessarily care about all the bells and whistles. I mean, they're nice, but that's not really what I want for my kids, and I think a lot of parents in Argyle agree. They want their teachers to be in a comfortable classroom, know their students. So like the cost of the gym at 377. I know Richie didn't like the 54 million, and we just completed a church for 22 million, and it's beautiful, and it's completely decked out and marble flooring. And I just think we could scale back some of the amenities and get the buildings and put the people in there and give kids the relationships over the buildings and the beauty.
And I agree. I mean,
To a certain degree.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think, not for anything else, but say plain Jane, just kind of, you know, just a functional building, a safe building. We want safety for our kids. I mean, I don't personally consider the current high school a great spot for safety with those two academic wings. I mean, building that connector was going to be a big help in that, and that was, I mean, even our police department kind of spoke about that.
Right.
You know, because you got that choke point in the building, and then you just have these two wings. That's it. There's no place else to go. So I personally, I mean, our next elementary school that we have a chance to design, I don't want to win any architectural awards. I don't want anything. I want this nice little red rectangular little school. I mean, that's, 2 stories maybe or whatever, but it's functional, it's safe, it has everything that the kids need.
Mr. Devenbaugh, you're not gonna like the design fees on that?
No.
Square. I'm gonna take it for you.
Well, no, I gotta tell you, this is my
Get it
last
out.
meeting. And do not take offense to this, not at all. But we have a lot of builds already planned, but we have a lot more builds. We have several builds in the future, right?
Yes.
I think the wisest thing for this district to do is hire an architect. Because of the substantial fees associated with the architectural design and everything else, that eats into millions and millions and millions of dollars in the bond. And I think you could pay somebody handsomely as a district architect and save some money. And also have, someone thinking about this 40 hours a week. That's just no offense, Marty, but I'm just saying, logically, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Northwest ISD has one, and kind of in the same position that Jeff is in, that work together on design fees and all those kinds of things.
Doesn't Keller has somebody too, I think.
Yes, but we're also, those are districts
Right.
with very large,
Huge.
multiple
Yes.
high schools.
True.
And if we're talking about salaries, we're getting into the M&O INS
Yes.
discussion. So,
And Northwest works with 4 architects as well, that do the majority of their ground up.
They still use.
Yes, they just have someone on staff.
Right, that's right, that's right.
So the only thing I want to clarify, and Richie and Sam and I, those have been on the board a little while, have gone through this discussion where you mentioned you did your church for this, or we had other people on the BOC in the past that did a hospital for that, or this for that square footage, or what I've learned painstakingly over the years is that schools are their own world. And while we may all agree, I mean, we had a gentleman on the BOC one year who was building hospitals for less per square foot than we were building schools for.
Hospitals.
But that should be.
Right, hospitals, right? So clean environment, has to be perfect,
Yes.
all those things. So we've gone down that road. I mean,
But should
I
we
just wanna be-
challenge it? Not.
I
maybe to
challenged it,
them,
Richie's
but-
challenged it, I've challenged it.
But I mean, at the state level, like, why is there not?
We got so much challenges. I'm not disagreeing with you, okay, but we've been down this road and comparing, making comparisons, and the public did it too. And it's right, I understand the comparison. Hey, I can build this building for $1 million. How does it cost you $10 million to do it?
Right.
Ask him.
A lot of different
I mean, it is what the,
Yeah, and the code, as you can imagine, is more
Industry
rigorous
states.
for schools because,
it's not as rigorous as it is for hospitals, and hospitals are cheaper per square foot. We can get into this, I'm ready.
yeah,
But I still.
I mean, all I'm saying is I want to caution people when they say, hey, I can build a church for 25 million and you're charging me 50
you're
million.
right. I mean,
for it.
schools are a different animal, and typically your school designers are gonna try and build you a 50-plus year product, and some of these other developmental products may not have that long of a lifespan, you know, and so they're looking
So,
for a quicker
I mean,
turnaround. as
my
far as
answer to that would be, so if I want to build a 25-year gym, is it cheaper than 50 million?
Well, if you tell me you want a building that's only gonna last for a much shorter period of time, then you can scale back on the quality of the equipment and the pieces that you're using. Now, I'm gonna tell you you're gonna have trouble, but.
I just want to make sure that everybody understands you can't
Absolutely.
compare, that's an apples to oranges comparison.
When you compare the window you see right here against the window you have in your house, I mean, it's a different level of.
But most people think a commercial grade window in this building and a church are the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
So I know people look in the community and they look at our price tag for this facility or that facility and they're like, it makes no sense to me, right? Because what they know in a commercial space, that they know they were involved in a project that just built this, similar square footage for half the cost.
Yeah.
We've been down this road, we've argued this point, how can that be?
And
I don't know how we get away from it, we've tried. I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and every project goes out for free market bids. I mean, and the market sets.
Right, but
the
if
costs.
everybody's in the same, if everybody's in the same category, and they're all bidding the same price, right? I need somebody to come in and go, I can still make a ton of money at $250 a square foot instead of $350.
I guess the other problem.
That's what I need. I
Is
just haven't found them yet.
Yeah,
Not-
you
not to
let
get-
me know when you find it,
Yeah.
correct?
Well, not to get too far in the weeds, but if you have a bond project and we've got $50 million set aside for an elementary school, then
Guess what the
every
bids are?
architect and contractor knows in the world, like, they've got $50 million,
Yeah.
they've gotta spend it. So
That's what Richie tells us.
That's
every
Richie's
meeting.
age-old concern. Absolutely. I mean, they know how much money we have to spend,
They have
so
better
let's make them
lives.
spend it.
Y'all ready for me to move on?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
All right, so we're past the voter data. So let's go in, let's talk about what we have been talking about as an administration since a week ago Monday. So we obviously knew what our bond outcomes were Saturday night, and we started talking Sunday, and really talking about our next steps, and that's where we are. So we brought to you today an opportunity to workshop and discuss our recommendations to get us moving forward. So what we know we have no additional capacity right now, or for the foreseeable future at either of these high school campuses, the 377 campus and the Canyon Falls campus. We don't have any additional middle school capacity, and that's gonna be a bottleneck for us. So we've got some solutions for that in a minute. We know we're gonna have to utilize both fully functioning high schools at their current capacities, which is 1,300 and 2,100. So that's enough for 3,400 students, which we know is about the next 10 years. We're gonna have to plan for middle school too with our current facility structures. And then we also are gonna have to plan for short-term bonds, more of those specific time and needs. I want to thank again our bond and growth planning committee, and several of them are here today, so thank y'all for coming, for being here to listen, because they really built out those projects and recommendations, and I think we have a plan for how to put those into shorter term bonds moving forward and still give the same recommendations that they brought to the board. And then we're going to start developing our transition teams this next year so that we can start our transitions to 2 middle schools and our transitions to 2 high schools. Because those are coming soon with our capacity realities. And then finalize our timeline for that high school transition in 27-28. So I want to talk a little bit about, we know the strategic growth plan, that has not changed. We know what the board said in January of 23 and did a short revision earlier in the winter. We have our capacities there, but here's what we have without the passage of the bond. We have room for 9,480 students. That's our seats right now with everything that we have that's either on the ground or in a bond that hasn't quite been built yet. So let's talk high schools for just a minute. So we have 1,300 and 2,100. I mentioned both of those numbers. We will hit capacity at Argyle High School right here at Canyon Falls starting 27-28. So that's the year we will transition to 2 high schools. As far as middle schools are concerned, we have enough room for all of our 6th graders to be at the 6th grade center technically through the 2030 school year. That gets us to just under 700 6th graders, but buys us some time to keep our 6th graders there. The new middle school that's going in on 407, that's in the 22 bond and already is in progress. We will break ground on that in June. We will move into that in 26-27 and the very next year be over capacity in middle school. So instead of moving students twice, we would recommend, our recommendation is we consider transitioning to 2 middle schools in 26-27 and leaving the second zone middle school kids at 377, which would become vacant that year. So you would have 2 middle schools starting in 26-27. As far as elementary goes, once 5's on the ground, we have over 4,000 seats, and so we're good there until the 2031 school year, which is where we had 6 coming in that was on this bond. So with 5 going up, we'll have 4,150 seats, and we'll be at 4,321 when we get to that 2031 range. So that's kind of where we are as far as our capacity realities. I want to talk a little bit about the UIL piece because we've spent a lot of time talking to UIL directly, to administration down there. Had several conversations with athletic directors in other districts that are going through multiple high school districts. There's a lot to think through with this that a lot of times people don't understand the implications of. So when you're talking UIL, you realign every 2 years on the even years. So you turn in your fall odd year enrollment to realign for a 2-year alignment. UIL has their rules on how you project enrollment into what classification you're going in. So 6A in their manual, if you are opening schools at the beginning of an alignment period, which would be an even year, then you open with 9th and 10th graders, you have to multiply 1.33 right off the bat. And so you're throwing 9th and 10th graders with a multiplier into a district for 2 years playing juniors and seniors. And so then your football, which is your highest contact sport, and y'all all know, I mean, that's a high contact sport. You're dealing with freshmen and sophomores having to play a 2-year alignment in a varsity UIL district, or they have to elect not to play in a UIL district for 2 years, which is detrimental to your sophomores because they would never play a varsity game until senior year. So there's a lot of pieces to think through when you talk about opening in an even versus an odd year. The advice given, and what I've experienced in my previous districts when we did a high school transition to 2, is you open in the middle of an alignment. So you open in that odd year. You do not have to use a multiplier that year. So for our situation, we would turn in our fall of 26 9th and 10th grade numbers, no multiplier. They would put us into a district for 1 year. Potentially it would be like a 3AD2. So our 9th and 10th graders at the 377 campus would play that 1 year only. They would play in a district minus football. Football would play like a JV schedule that first year, and then they enter into an alignment because football's district is separate than everything else.
So just, so they would be, the 9th and 10th graders would be considered its own high school.
Yes.
And the value of doing it, which is the same case as if we did this in 26.
Yes, same case. It's just,
But the value is no multiplier required for that, but they're still playing varsity opponents.
every sport except football, yes.
Okay, so my concern there, well, I guess I don't see I was thinking that they would still be part of the larger high school, but they're actually a separate high school at that time.
They are separate.
What if we went 9th through 11th, same consideration, or is there a multiplier required?
Same multiplier,
Okay,
1.33 either
so
way.
the value is being able to participate in a smaller level division.
With your earlier grades.
But then the other side is, if you do it earlier, I'm just trying to speak through this. If you do it earlier, you have to have a multiplier, but I wonder whether even if that multiplier puts you into another category
It
or
does.
not.
Based on the numbers I'm going to show you, it puts you into 4AD2 versus 3AD1.
So 9th through 10th would.
9 and 10 only for that first one. Now, the next one, when you realign for the next 2 year, you have to do the multiplier, which is what it talks about in the bottom piece. So if you did the 27-28 transition, you no multiplier for that 1 year. Then the next alignment, when everybody's turning theirs in, you turn in your 9 and 10 numbers that you currently have with the multiplier. And so you'll go into a new 2 year alignment with freshmen through juniors, and then the second year you'll have your senior class. So that you do have a multiplier that second when you go into the full 2 year alignment. Yes, that is correct.
And have you projected, like on today's UIL numbers, where that would put us in year 2? Is that
you're talking about when it's a full realignment? It looks like it's going to be a 3A. Of course, they change them, so it's hard. You can't.
So you said 3A D2 the first
D1,
year,
and then going to 4A D2 right away in the second one. Most likely. Now they shift those some, and they usually shift them 2 to 3%.
Yeah.
So that's what we were looking at. If you open in the beginning, the other thing, the advice given when talking to UIL is if you open in an even and you do the multiplier, but your football has to either choose at that time, either you're going in or you're not. You can't go in, stay out 1 year and then go in the second year. You can't do that. So you would either be in all the way with football for 2 years, or you would be out of UIL competition for 2 years. And you would basically run a JV schedule. So your sophomores would never play in a...
You would have juniors, an all junior
Right,
team
right.
that could be varsity if
Yes,
you waited.
correct. And so when you're talking about just exposure and all those things, you would be a senior before you actually played a UIL competition district game, if you will.
Is there an option to, if you waited to 27-28 to actually go with 9th through 11th? And we talked before about opting in as a
Junior option.
And I'd be curious what percentage would.
Mm-hmm.
But 9th through 11th still would be no multiplier. But then the following year, you'd basically have a 9th through 12th. So you have
You
your
would,
own.
mhm.
And so
Yeah.
I wonder if that's not from the implementation
Sure.
perspective, but I just wonder if that's a better potential by utilizing this 27-28.
And we were looking at a junior option originally until we knew we were gonna have to have 7th and 8th graders in there as well. So, and when you don't know exactly how many juniors would choose to go over, we were trying to make sure we didn't put us in a position where we were trying to give ourselves 1 more year on middle school too.
Well, that's when you can have an M&O issue where, because you've got classrooms that are half empty because you don't have enough
Right.
juniors that have stepped in there.
And the other thing is, the current high school, once the new one opens, they don't get to drop, they have to stay in that UIL district with what they have. So you're pulling your 9th and 10th off, but if you start pulling juniors off, then that's pulling even more out, and they still have to go in that, in that 1 year. So there's implications all the way around,
But UIL recommends this is the smoothest.
And every other athletic director I've talked to, and I've talked to several that have been through it, and then I've been through it, experienced myself, and watched it.
And is Coach Rogers giving feedback?
The conversation I've had with Coach Rogers is he's expecting a middle alignment as well.
So you mentioned 7th and 8th graders. Can you go back one slide? At the middle or close to the bottom where you said consider transitioning to middle schools, you're referring to, at that point, 26, 27, 377 would be 7 through 10?
7, 8 only that year.
For 1 year.
And they'll take 9 and 10 on the next year.
And then it would be 7 through 10.
And then 7 through 11 before we move them out, which you'll see in a
And
second.
then moving them out is assuming we get approved to build another
Correct.
middle school.
Correct.
Okay.
And I've got that right here. So,
Based on that last slide, or the slide before, and I can be sold either way, and I'm only one of 7, so it doesn't matter. But so I was originally thinking, it's a smart move to keep the 7th and 8th graders in that current middle school for a year. But I was thinking at that time, does not make sense just to go ahead and do it all, start the new high school, et cetera. But you're telling me the UIL issues. But then secondarily, I probably do see some benefit to having just the middle school wing operating and giving us time to prepare for the high school side.
And I think that's.
There probably is some benefit
Yes.
to that.
And I think that's the discussion we've had internally, just thinking through transition teams, because in a minute, when I show you a timeline, you're talking bringing on the high school principal in the spring of '26 for an opening in the fall of '27. We would have to budget and have that principal coming on board this next spring. And so this would give us a little time to get them acclimated and then schedule. Mhm. Okay, so let's look at, so Liz and I have been talking with our demographer, and these are just projected numbers. We have nothing other than him giving us projected numbers, knowing our current capacities of how we could potentially zone the district in a way that we could maximize our capacities of the campuses as we have them right now. So remember, 26-27 would be just 7th and 8th grade only. Then you come into 27-28, you would have about 459 through 10th graders and 439 7th through 8th graders. So you're looking at 68% of the capacity over there for the first year. Then you add one more high school grade in there in 28-29. You can still keep your middle school. That gives us another year to get bonded and you try to get a middle school passed, and puts us at 95% capacity. And then we get middle school 2 passed, we get it ready to go and get it open in 29-30. Then we can move the 7th, 8th graders out, and now we can go 9-12, and you'll see how it trickles down there. That also takes, and then you've got Canyon Falls over here, this campus, which is a 2,100 capacity, and shows you, other than having those 7th and 8th graders in there for a couple of years, you've got pretty similar capacity percentages all the way down until we run out of room. So you're hovering in that 70s to 80s to 90s, so you don't have a lot of discrepancy there in terms of percentages of your capacities. And we basically get to the 2033-34 school year. What our demographer told us as we were preparing this is this includes the Hines development in the ETJ portion of First Ranch, and it includes this law estancia that's going on for public comment, I guess, in the town of Flower Mound. Like we got the public comment form. So they're about to have that information. So that's anticipating that development as the way it's been presented to them, and the ETJ portion of Hines. So the way he's got that configured includes both of those. And he said both of those, if this ETJ, they're moving dirt in June, but this one here will be pretty quick because it's part of that lawsuit with that won't be a delay. Once it's done, they're gonna start rolling.
And that's just south of our
The
current
250
football
acres
field.
right here, yes, behind us. The Ewing property is, as it's been referred to.
And again, just to clarify for those out there, the Hines portion is the ETJ of
Barton.
First Ranch. So even though people have talked about, they're not moving dirt in
Right.
Flower Mound, that's fine. There's still a fairly large portion of First
Yes.
Ranch that is ETJ.
1,200
And not part of
Flower
the
Mound.
Flower Mound city limits.
Correct.
And
that
that's getting
is-
started this summer.
Right, they have confirmed with us they will start in June.
Yep.
So without spending an extra dime, we're able to utilize, well, I guess we will have to spend an extra dime on a middle school too.
Right,
But we're able to utilize our current campuses to capacity all the way through 2033.
correct.
And closer to the time, we can decide, is this a slowdown or, I mean, it sounds like it's pretty conservative right now as far as the growth. And then what to do with overages, whether it be portables, or we go out for a bond, or we think about another small high school somewhere in the district, or even like a CTE-focused high school in the district
Right.
to offset some of that. I think it gives us some options without spending any more money on our current 2 high schools,
Correct.
right?
And that leads into what we as a district, we've taken the information from the Bond and Growth Committee, all the proposed recommendations, and we've created a timeline essentially for the board to consider. Obviously, these could fluctuate a little bit depending on growth and different things, but this is what we are looking at potentially recommending as future bond, out of those recommendations, a timeline for those future bonds. So we know this fall, we have to have some land money. So we would come back to you and potentially request the board to consider calling an election in November for land, buses, and those technology infrastructure pieces that were part of Prop A. Also, a few of the capital improvements. For example, the turf at 377, it will be a safety issue because we're at 10 years and the lifespan of that is 10. So we've got to think about that in terms of concussion protocols and all of those. So that could potentially be something we came to you and said, we want to put these 3 or 4 capital improvements in there as well. Wouldn't be a super large bond, but it would be one that would get us what we need right now. Then we would come back potentially in November of 25, and in order to have that middle school open in 29, that would give us the opportunity to bring the new middle school to the voters, if the board chose to call that election, to get us open in 29-30. We may have to have some portables at 377, just depends on where those numbers fall, and maybe some additional capital improvements depending on how things progress there, and then looking back at that baseball, softball again, because that would be in line of, if we brought that to you in November 25 and we tried to get that open in 28-29, that would be a year after our high schools transition to 2. So we would spend 1 year sharing those facilities, knowing that that would be coming behind that. So that's a potential November of 25. Those are back to back, and then take a little bit of a breather from bonds, but we would need to be coming back and start thinking elementary schools for getting the 6th elementary open potentially in May of 28. We could go back the next following year, we could put it all in 28, but then we've got to start thinking elementary 7, so we'll have time to look at growth, but then we've got to think about our high schools. So at that point, we have to be thinking in 33, 34, we need a solution. And what's that solution? Is it gonna be to expand 377? Is it gonna be to expand the phase 3 over here at Canyon Falls, or is it gonna be to consider high school 3? So but we would have some time to work on that as a district. If we could get some land money and secure some land, then we could have those conversations with some options.
And potentially buy land in today's dollars.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, and I know some of the frustration that we heard was, oh my gosh, you're spending $1 million an acre, which is just, it's just absurd. People gotta understand that we can't tell you exactly what we're planning on spending per acre or the acres that we're looking at, because that drives the market value up. Just so.
Well, and we don't set the price on the acreage.
No. And we don't want to.
Why does that matter?
We don't want to share what we are budgeted for per acre either.
Right, because then people know what you
You don't want them to know.
Yeah.
So I think this is well thought out, well timed, well planned, right? Part of the reason we thought about doing this and looking at a longer term bond, you mentioned a minute ago, to give ourselves options, to do things in today's dollars versus having to do them down the road. Any one of these proposed bond things doesn't pass, people have to realize we've now gone back into the short-term bond strategy, and I'm not gonna say we painted ourselves in a corner, but if it doesn't pass, be prepared for portables. Don't get upset. It is what it is. We have to. These kids are coming. We have to find a place for them, and this is what the community is saying they want in terms of smaller, tighter bonds. And by the way, it passes in 28. It doesn't open till 31. It takes time to do it. It doesn't. You don't get the money in 28 and open it the next year. It doesn't work that way.
Can I also say, it's a reality that portables won't pass. And what I mean by that is from a town perspective, a city perspective. So, Flower Mound's got caveats. We know Argyle's got caveats for it. I'm not familiar enough with North Lake. We haven't had portables there, but that's not a guarantee. You can't just say we want portables. And working with these municipalities, they have shown ways in which they can block you utilizing portables.
And what we found with the portables is some of our municipalities won't allow them without an active construction permit. You can't have an active construction project unless you have a bond pass.
So this will be a discussion later that Rich will be involved in, you guys. So on the November 25 thought process of obviously you need the money for the build of middle school 2. But if that's the middle school that is feeding now 377, which is a 1,300 capacity, we could probably discuss, do we need to build it to 1,200? Or would it save decent amount of money to build it.
Look at 1,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Unless you have
vote,
3 grades in.
but unless you vote down the road to actually expand a little bit at Canyon Falls, then you wish you'd built it bigger.
Right, because you'd have two, you wouldn't have a true feeder.
Maybe it doesn't expand past 1,300, I don't know.
Right, I mean, maybe that's kind of our strategic thought process now is we'll lock that in, we'll lock this in, and then we'll look for other alternatives later.
If we had a strategic.
Well,
Which is what we're saying here.
I mean, if you're thinking on the table, the possibility of a third high school, you're probably gonna need a third middle school. Because you really would wanna have true feeders. And so the implication on that obviously is cost, finding land, and the land can't just be anywhere. The land has to be where it fits. To flow for high schools, middle schools, and to actually make your attendance boundaries.
A district out in West Texas that's done a really good job of their master planning is Canyon ISD. They have 3 high schools right now that are all 4A size. They have 3 true middle schools that feed them, 3 intermediates that feed them, and then they've got, the elementaries are a little wonky because I think they've got 5, it's not a true feeder, but it's the best it's the best you can do right now. But I've spent some time out there over the last 18 months as my daughter's been in school out there in college, and I've talked to people in the community. I've talked to some of their administrators because it is a very intriguing model, and they have done a great job, and they're very successful in everything they do. But listening to the parents talk, when I was we were out there for graduation this past weekend, and I talked to a parent who said, we absolutely love it, and we get along great with the other feeders because we're in our own feeder. So they're able to, their culture is still very strong. And I thought that was a very interesting conversation. But what they've done it well. And I've even heard Coach Rogers talk about how Canyon has done their master planning and how well they've done that for their community out there. So I think that's, we've been talking to different communities that have a lot of the same values and foundations that Argyle has, and that's what we're hearing is those smaller environments, just like that we've heard, multiple times, where everybody knows your name, and that's how kids stay connected. And we want to know that kids are involved in things. We want to know that kids are connected, and we want our teachers and our students, because when you read quotes of students in a yearbook and they're saying it's too big, we don't know each other, you have to be great to be a part of something, that's where we start missing out what that's not why we're here. We're here for our kids to be engaged and connected.
And that mapped out plan comes with a price tag.
Right.
Yeah, it does.
Because can you do it with 2 middle schools? Yes. Is it better for educational opportunity and experience for our kids to do 3? Well, that's what voters have to weigh. Because they're the ones supporting it with bond money. So there are options, and I've said it, I think maybe in this workshop twice, maybe more in other areas, like doing what we think is best for our kids is not always the cheapest option.
Right. And I was also gonna say, as far as portables go, that's a hit on an M&O budget, big time.
That is.
A big hit.
Well, Liz can go back and we can look at the cost from a decade ago when we had not only portables at the high school, portables at Hilltop. And we got portables for free from Northwest ISD to the tune of $300,000. They were free.
Just put them in and
Right.
take them out.
Right, and then
Because we had to plumb them, we had to bring electricity to them, they had to get moved in and moved out, and so they were completely free for $300,000.
Sometimes you have to landscape them.
And that was 10 years ago. Yeah.
Well, and you also have to pay the permit fees and everything else, and the inspection fees and everything that the towns require for, electric, your building permit, your plumbing if you need it, that kind of stuff. It gets
Well, and that
pricey.
goes back to even our turf situation. We have to figure out a way to get that replaced. If we can in a capital improvement through a bond, we'll have to go into M&O for turf replacement.
Right.
It has to be replaced.
And that turf cost is almost equal to teacher raises.
You are correct.
Yeah.
And you have that as part of the November 24 consideration?
Yes, that would be one of the things that would be in it.
And so to have kids out on a field that is the probability of increased injuries, like who wants that? Like that, so it is something
I do not want that.
we have to, it's one of those things like, yes, that would be awesome on a bond, short term.
You're saying we're legally required.
Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
we have to concussion test that turf.
Right.
Or you shut it down,
But-
shut it down here in the stadium.
But if it comes out of M&O, then,
Right.
you know, that's when we're back to probably another workshop.
True. So we have been working on a timeline to show you as we transition to 2 high schools in the fall of '27. So we would be doing transition teams and communication plans next year. That would be everything we're doing from those learner services. Dr. Jordan, you know, she would have all things curriculum instruction and preparing. It's going to take time. Like we have to give ourselves time to do that, because while we're in that current school year, we're preparing for a big transition. We have the finance and operations, student services, the personnel piece we're planning for, communications. There's so much related to that. And then the school culture and engagement. And there's a lot of different pieces that go into each one of those type of transition teams. We've been talking to, I've talked to former superintendents that have now retired, that have gone through multiple high school transitions. This is the common theme: transition teams 2 years out, transition teams 2 years out. And so we would start those. We would continue our financials and budget planning that we are already working on. Ms. Stewart and Mr. Daniel are working hand in hand on that, because there's so much personnel in that, so they're working on those. Then that's kind of the full year 1. We get into year 2, between that November and February timeframe of 25 to February 26, we are working on zoning. We are working on the naming of the middle school at 407 at the same time that we're naming the high school over here on 377. And then we're selection mascot colors and everything. So all of that gets solidified in that time frame from November to February in that second year, which would be 25 rolling into 26. Then that principal for high school 2 has got to be on board the spring of 26, because we then hand over those transition teams to that high school principal that's working with this high school principal on master scheduling, staffing allocation, and course offerings, because that is a beast. It's not like opening an elementary or a middle school. There's a lot that goes into that. I've been interviewing principals that opened up second high schools, very common themes we've pulled and put in there. Then we open year 3, August 26th, we transition middle schools. So middle school 1 zone moves to the new campus on 407. Middle school 2 zone remains at the current 377 campus, knowing that that's their home for the next 2 years. And so then year 3, we deal with our extracurricular and UIL, talking about our numbers that we have to turn in because of snapshot dates. We transition to AD only. So at that point, right now, we have a combined AD head coach position. But as any district of our size, you transition to an AD only role. And then your 2 high schools have a head football coach / athletic coordinator. That is very standard. That AD is a district level position overseeing both high schools, all things UIL. And then bringing on the band director at midterm, so that they can use the spring to do all their recruiting and working on getting their programs off the ground for the start in 27. We submit the enrollment to UIL at October snapshot, all in the fall of 26. And then spring of 27, you have all finishing the staffing, you're ordering everything to prepare for opening, all the community engagement pieces, preparing to open, athletic schedule, setting schedules, because at that point you're in the alignment, the UIL piece, and so you're trying to get all your schedules set, and then opening in the fall of 27.
I get most excited for the students on the 26 middle school divide, because any parent with middle schoolers right now knows the competitiveness of even making a team in middle school. And this allows double the teams. And you think about that age, 7th, 8th grade, you're trying to find your place. Crucial. You're trying to find your people, and you can't make a team because there's so many competing. Well, this gives more kids an opportunity. So I love that in 26.
And on that note, I've talked to parents who, that very thing, I mean, they're spending so much time in these club sports and pumping all this money and hours into that, and these kids are coming out thinking, I can't even try out for school unless I do this, because there's so many limited opportunities when you have that many students. And so this will provide, and we will connect kids that might have been cut in cut sports or cut programs that will have an opportunity. And that's exciting, because our kids have to be, in today's age, our kids have to be connected. And they have to be engaged in some sort of an atmosphere where they learn teamwork and collaboration and competition. So
I think, are we going to 4 middle school bands next year?
I know our middle school band program is exploding, yes,
It's exploding.
especially at 6th grade, the beginner band for sure.
And that's tough. I mean, for kids who are just learning to work with an ensemble after 6th grade, kind of working, focusing on your instrument and your little group. And then you have like 4 different bands that you know, split up into, so.
And there's a lot of developmental aspects happening in grades 6, 7, and 8.
Yes.
And if you think you're a star at that age, you may not be, or if you don't think you're a star at that age, you may be later. And so we want to keep those kids, we want them to have opportunities, because we've all known kids who weren't the shining star in middle school, ended up being great at whatever they did because they were given the opportunity.
Michael Jordan.
Yeah, there you go, Michael Jordan. Exactly.
I've heard that story.
So we may have the next Michael Jordan.
Cut
We
from his
absolutely may.
basketball team.
Okay, so that brings us to the end for just kind of continued discussion, feedback from the board on this discussion, strategic direction for the district for you to give us moving forward, and then Bond and Growth Planning Committee communication. What do you want us to go back to our committee with? Anything that you still need from them? What do you want us to recap with them? Just your expectations of that.
I mean, I feel comfortable knowing what the bond committee recommended and kind of the why. At the time, I'm not sure at this point that you need to reconvene 50 people or 55 people to kind of rehash out what has already been said. I think it's a matter at this point in time for the board and the administration to focus on, again, everything that you guys have talked about here. It's like, okay, we have to pivot. The bond didn't pass, but this is what the bond committee recommended. Overall, I know we tweaked 1 or 2 things. But to go back there, to me, it's just, it's I mean, if they have input that they want to give, I would welcome any of them to, you know, email or, you know, give us input and stuff. But I don't see the point of bringing that whole group back together time-wise, especially if we're looking at doing a bond in November, because we'd have to call that by when?
August.
August.
Uh-huh.
Which is only a couple of months from now, so.
Well, and I think
Summer.
the committee provided the framework that
Yes.
we knew we were gonna need. And we thought, I had heard even a couple of years ago when I was running, that the district in the past was too reactive in their bond planning. And so every day it was, we need to be proactive. We need to think long-term. We need to do these things. And we tried, but the appetite wasn't there when you start looking at the inflationary cost. I mean, it doesn't change what we're going to need. It's going to tweak some of the things that we were looking at, but everything else is still there. It's just going to be in smaller bits and pieces. And I appreciate what you put together. I think it's the right approach. You know, again, you touched on it a minute ago. I think the most important thing is we want all of our students to have the best possible experience from kindergarten through high school. And what we've seen, as you mentioned, talking to superintendents and everyone in your network, people I've reached out to, they talk about the importance of smaller environments. And kids tend to get lost when they're in bigger schools. And we often hear, or at least I've heard, comparisons to Southlake or Byron Nelson or some of these other schools, and they're 2,800. They're large schools. They're not small by any stretch, but they're also not as large as we will end up being. So it's not apples to apples. And some of those districts have done things, you know, well with their split campuses and things like that. But, you know, most of the people that I've talked to, unless they just get behind a mascot or something, they want what's best for the students, whether it's their children or other children in the district. And I think that's, again, that's our why, right? As Mr. Slayton says all the time, that's our why. So, you know, I like what's been presented. I think it's the right approach. I think, you know, strategically considering some of those other options of a 7 through 12 or whatever the numbers dictate is something to look at, again, to make sure that all the students in the district are able to experience that smaller environment where they're known by all the teachers and they don't get lost. So I appreciate what you guys have done. Thank you.
I want to echo Mr. Slayton here. We've heard we need more vision, right? And we need to be not reactive. We need to be forecasting accurately and throwing that out there. And so I do feel the Bond Planning and Growth Committee did a good job of putting the foundation out there. And so that is a vision right there. The appetite is for shorter bonds, but here's the vision. So I think we have the long-term plans of what this district needs. We're just gonna do it in shorter chunks. So I think you get the best of both worlds in that. The appetite for shorter bonds, but you still have your foundational vision there. And this board, again, to talk about the why, this board has never taken its eyes off the why. And this does provide our kids the best educational opportunities. Me being a mental health professional, inclusion in something that kids can be a part of is so important today, more so than ever. And this allows our kids those opportunities. So we do an excellent job as a district. Can we be better? Absolutely, but that's what we're focused on, is being better, and providing our kids more opportunities to belong to something, to grow socially, to just have more things that they can attach themselves to outside of the classroom. That's what we're doing, and that's what we're going to continue to do and do better. So just as much as it's for the kids in the district today, it's for the kids in the district that aren't even born yet. And that's the vision we're looking for. We heard several people say, like, this is maybe a blessing in disguise almost, that these two propositions did not pass. It doesn't change this strategic plan and vision for the district, and that's encouraging, and we're a very resilient district, we're a very supported district, and you know, we've heard that, and we're gonna keep moving forward. So I appreciate all of this, especially the forethought in mapping things out, all of the behind the scenes work that went into meeting with other superintendents, other districts, other communities, getting that feedback from all perspectives and fitting that into who we are in Argyle. So.
And I think you'll notice that's been happening since I got here, because we couldn't have done that in the last 10 days, right? I mean, that's stuff that we have been working on, but you know, now is the time to put it together, so.
You know, I'll throw this grenade out there. You mentioned mascots and how there's been so much discussion about mascots, not about the students' mental health or the academic resilience, or it's been mascots. I have to step back and think, Eagles is a popular mascot name. In fact, I can remember Argyle Eagles playing the Decatur Eagles, and you know what? They still allowed the game. That's crazy. And they still could identify which team was this high school and which team was this high school. And I can't, for any reason, think why any of the next two high schools or even three high schools, why can't they be Eagles?
Yes.
You know,
we've heard.
There's really I don't have any rationale to think why they can't be.
Right, yeah.
I mean, to me, that's just an argument that just It doesn't make
They
sense.
likely won't even be in the same divisions.
No,
Labeling it.
well,
Well, they won't be with
no,
these
in this
past
case, they won't be,
Yeah, in this
but,
case, they won't be, right.
What does Sam always say? Stop using logic. Stop it.
I mean, it's a.
There's a lot of always things I say. A lot of absolutes, I'm sorry.
Well,
Well, that will be for our transition teams to work through.
There you go.
There you
Yes,
go.
that's it. I was just gonna say, to add to my comment earlier, I know you had some stuff in here about the work and the people that came during the election, and they wanted they had the questions and some of the misinformation, misinterpretation things that went out there. And I'm just gonna tell you, from all of you guys sitting over there and all of you guys sitting over here, I know that you worked so hard, almost giving up everything else that you had to do on your job just to field a lot of those questions, to answer and spend time researching, to get back to the people so that you could have them be informed voters. And I can't speak for the rest of my colleagues here, but for me, I think we'd all agree, but I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you guys did. It was professional, it was clear, it was thorough, and everything that you did, and sometimes I know you took a beating. And unfortunately, again, you go back to the whys. Our why is the kids. And there shouldn't be any beatings when we're talking about kids. I mean, it's just as simple as that. And I hope the community can see the vision, see what we're looking at, know that we have heard them. Obviously, they don't want a long-term bond. I get it. I love what you guys have put together and spent the time to put together. And I like that we can just take it in steps. But again, I agree with you that if something doesn't pass along the way, it's a pretty finely locked little plan. And so, that's just something that we need to pay attention to. And as time goes on and demographics or growth may shift and change, you kind of think about that. But I think in the long run, a lot of this is going to cost us a lot more money, but it is what it is. And so maybe not. But I just wanted to thank all of you, from the three of you sitting back over there quietly, to you guys over here. I mean, again, and Lizzie as well. I mean, I know Lizzie, all of you guys were, yes, you were too. And just the input was fabulous for us, and I know you worked hard for the community, so thank you.
Well, and anytime I have a chance to talk about our CFO, I mean, she's been in this district 14 years. We have a CFO that other people want and they can't get. There are headhunters for CFOs like her. So for anyone to cast a shadow of a doubt on something that she says is very disheartening.
Absolutely.
We are a district, she has brought this district through a lot of different types of crises. And she's gonna be mad at me for saying this because this was not planned, but I just want people to understand how fortunate we are.
Yes.
The level of integrity in Liz Stewart is top notch. And so I trust her with our numbers, I trust her with her planning, and know that we're in great hands, and we're going to do exactly what we need to do to provide excellent experiences for our kids.
And I can tell you, as yourself, with over 30 years in education myself, that is number one sitting over there. I've never seen anyone like her in all my travels. She's awesome, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if there's no other feedback or discussion points, then we can close the workshop at your discretion.
I'm gonna wait 9 more seconds so it's an even number.
Okay.
I've got
Sounds
another
good.
question.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments, questions before I adjourn?
My comment is, I'm so appreciative of the clock in the corner. You have no idea.
And I just want to say again, thank you for those of you that were here that served, those of you that didn't serve on the committee that are here because you have vested interest in this district. Thank you.
Mr. Deffenbaugh, anything?
I said my piece as the time goes on. I'm very good.
All right, time's 4:30 p.m. and we're adjourned for this workshop.